I'm Lizzie Thompson, and I'm presenting on gender-based violence in South Africa. So to start my presentation, I just wanted to go through the definitions of the different types of violence and abuse I'm going to be talking about, just so everyone's on the same page. So gender-based violence is violence that is directed at a person based off of their gender, and it causes a lot of inequalities between men and women. And domestic violence is any physical, sexual, or verbal abuse that's in the household, either done by like who you're married to or a family member. And then physical abuse is an act of another party involving contact intended to hurt you physically or even mentally. Sexual abuse is any unwanted, forced act of anything sexual. And verbal abuse is any lie or threat told to you or about you that makes you feel insecure. So some statistics in South Africa about women specifically that are abused. 90% of women in South Africa are abused, and South Africa is ranked 16th out of the 20 countries as the worst for women. There's also nowhere safe for women and girls in South Africa because often at schools, rape will occur by teachers to young girls. And then obviously in the homes for both women and like even daughters, they have the rape at home as well. And then this chart I found really interesting. It asked people in South Africa, do you think life could ever be the same again after being raped? And as you can see, both males, females, and people from urban and rural areas all said, no, life can't ever be the same again after being raped. So I thought that was interesting because men are primarily the ones that are doing the abuse to the women, but yet they know that it's going to cause them detrimental problems throughout their life. So there are two main laws that try to regulate domestic violence. The first one was in 1998, and it was to give women protection from abuse by South African police officers. And this didn't really do much, unfortunately. It's kind of just like a law on a piece of paper. Doesn't really stop the violence from happening. And then in 2007, they updated the Sexual Offense and Related Matters Act 32, which is part of like a big section of criminal laws in South Africa. And this makes rape and or sexual abuse a statutory offense as opposed to just a common law offense. And it states that gender-based violence is a violation of the human rights in South Africa. And an interesting point about this act was that it recognizes that women and children are the most vulnerable types of people like globally, so that's why they are being abused. A community that is really not supported in South Africa and also in the United States in some areas is the lesbian and gay and bisexual community. Specifically in South Africa, lesbians are the ones that are targeted because of the gender inequality that is present. And so as you can see, the Cape Town lesbians, they have a lot of protests and stuff, and a lot of these protests are broken up by police officers, and the women are taken actually from the protests into like alleys that are nearby, and they'll be beaten or raped, and people have been killed too for coming out. So that's just like interesting because it's also happening in the United States. Obviously not the brutality of it, but there are people in the United States who are gay and not allowed to get married, etc. But it's just more extreme in South Africa. So a story that really demonstrates this abuse being all the time and affecting everyone, not just like the impoverished people, it also affects like the highest people of the community, is the Oscar Pistorius trial. Oscar Pistorius is an Olympian, and he killed his girlfriend, Riva Steenkamp, and the two got into a heated argument, and she went into the bathroom with her cell phone to call for help, and he shot her through the door. And so currently he's going on trial, and there's a lot of media attention because he is the obviously a well-known Olympian. And so South Africa is kind of seeing this as a way to show that there is so much violence regardless of where you come from or how much money you have or what your status is in society. Like, it's just everywhere in their country. And there's a campaign going on right now during the trial called I Am Riva, and it's the women who are in similar situations as her that have actually either escaped or are trying to escape the situation that they're in. So they're kind of like advocating for her even after she's gone. And so I have a video to show you of people who have been protesting outside of the courtroom as the trial's been going on. So as you can see, they're literally right outside the courtroom, and it's like a mass of people, and it's actually not just women. Like, you can see the one guy dancing around in the front. So it's just become a huge movement just to show that like this is happening all the time in South Africa. So the QU seminars and how they relate to gender-based violence. In QU101, we were taught that you are an individual in whatever community you're assimilating yourself with. So when we go to South Africa, we'll be becoming an aid in the global community for the women, like women who have been abused. And in QU201, I took a seminar that talked about problems in America. So we talked about gender inequality in America. So it's interesting to compare the two, like it's going on in both countries. And in this class, we've learned about the history of inequality in South Africa. It's always been present. It used to be like mostly focused on race, but women have always been seen as lesser regardless. And then we've been talking about the current problems in South Africa and what we'll be seeing while we're there. So I'm a psychology major at Quinnipiac, and the way psych relates to domestic violence is these women will have psychological damage from being raped and abused for the rest of their lives. And there's actually two psychological components that go with abuse. One is called destructive thought process, and it actually happens in the males who are doing the abuse. And so the men will have thoughts such as, you're not a man unless you control her, or you're supposed to be doing this, it's the way society wants you to be. It's kind of like a dominance thing. And the second is called a fantasy bond, which happens for the females. And it's the sense that one person can make you happy and is responsible for like upholding you. So they feel that they constantly need to be with this man, and that's why it's so hard for them to leave. And then there's 3 programs that target domestic abuse in South Africa. The first is FAMSA, which is Families in South Africa. And what they do is promote counseling and education for the entire family, not just the women, so that they can have a more functional home. And then they're actually the national leader in services that enhance relationships, so often they can be successful if they can intervene early enough. POWA is People Opposing Women's Abuse, and it's a feminist women's rights organization that promotes services and engages in advocacy in order to have like the realization of women's rights. Like they're trying to promote that women do have the rights that everyone else does. And they provide shelters and counseling and support groups. And they also use the media to get the like problems out there. And then Legal Aid South Africa provides pro bono legal aid to anyone who's looking for it to get out of the violence. So yeah.
Questions? What did you find most interesting with doing your research and doing this project?
I would say I found actually the intervention programs the most, because I didn't know that they have so many organizations specifically for domestic violence in South Africa, like concentrated in South Africa. So I thought that was really interesting.
And is there anything that you're hoping to see when you're there in terms of being able to see something more specific on what you've researched?
Well, I think that when we interact with the women who do the quilts, that'll be interesting, because like we know that they're not coming from the best family or home situations. So I think it'll be interesting to actually talk to someone who might be going through what I researched.
Very nice.